General Audience number 121 of August 1st, 1984. For today, we have chosen the topic of responsible fatherhood and motherhood in light of Gaudium et Spes and Humanae Vitae. In facing this question, the conciliar constitution limits itself to recalling the fundamental premises. The papal document, by contrast, goes further and gives more concrete contents to these premises. The council text reads as follows, quote, "When there is a question of harmonizing conjugal love with the responsible transmission of life, the moral aspects of any procedure do not depend solely on sincere intentions or on an evaluation of motives, but must be determined by objective standards. These, based on the nature of the human person and his acts, preserve the full sense of mutual self-giving and human procreation in the context of true love. Such a goal cannot be achieved unless the virtue of conjugal chastity is sincerely practiced." And the council adds, quote, "Relying on these principles, children of the church may not undertake methods of birth control, which are found blameworthy by the teaching authority of the church." Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 51. Before this passage, the council teaches, quote, "Thus they will fulfill their task with human and Christian responsibility and with docile reverence towards God. This means that they will make decisions by common counsel and effort. Let them thoughtfully take into account both their own welfare and that of their children, those already born and those which the future may bring. For this accounting, they need to reckon with both the material and the spiritual conditions of the times, as well as of their state in life. Finally, they should consult the interests of the family group, of temporal society, and of the church herself." At this point, words follow that are of particular importance in determining with greater precision the moral character of responsible fatherhood and motherhood. We read, quote, "The parents themselves and no one else should ultimately make this judgment in the sight of God." And continuing, quote, "But in their manner of acting, spouses should be aware that they cannot proceed at will, but must always be governed according to a conscience dutifully conformed to the divine law itself, and should be docile toward the church's teaching office, which authentically interprets that law in the light of the gospel. That divine law reveals and protects the integral meaning of conjugal love and impels it toward a truly human fulfillment." From Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 50. While limiting itself to recalling the premises needed for responsible fatherhood and motherhood, the conciliar constitution highlighted them without any ambiguity by clarifying the constitutive elements of this fatherhood and motherhood, namely the mature judgment of personal conscience in its relation to the divine law, authentically interpreted by the magisterium of the church. Basing itself on the same premises, Humanae Vitae goes further by offering concrete indications. One can see this first in the way of defining responsible parenthood. Humanae Vitae, paragraph 10. Paul VI attempts to clarify this concept by going back to its various aspects and excluding beforehand its reduction to one of the partial aspects, a reduction found among those who speak exclusively about birth control. From the very beginning, in fact, Paul VI is guided in his argumentation by an integral conception of man. See Humanae Vitae, paragraph 7, and of conjugal love, paragraphs 8 and 9. One can speak about responsibility in the exercise of fatherhood and motherhood under various aspects. Thus, he writes, quote, "In relation to biological processes, responsible parenthood means the knowledge of and reverence for their functions. The human intellect discovers in the power of giving life biological laws which are part of the human person." Humanae Vitae, paragraph 10. When the psychological dimension is at issue and the tendencies of drives or passions, responsible parenthood means that necessary dominion which reason and will must exercise over them. Humanae Vitae, paragraph 10. Taking the above-mentioned aspects within the person as given, and adding economic and social conditions, one must recognize that, quote, responsible parenthood is exercised either by the prudent and generous decision to raise a numerous family, or by the decision made for serious reasons and with due respect for the moral law to avoid for the time being, or even for an indeterminate period, a new birth. Also from paragraph 10. It follows from this that the concept of responsible parenthood contains the disposition not only to avoid a new birth, but also to increase the family according to the criteria of prudence. In this light, in which one must examine and decide the question of responsible parenthood, what remains central is the objective moral order established by God, of which a right conscience is the faithful interpreter. Humane Vitae, paragraph 10. The couple observe in this area, quote, their own duties towards God, towards themselves, towards the family, and towards society in a correct hierarchy of values. Thus, one cannot speak here of proceeding at will. On the contrary, the couple must, quote, conform their activity to the creative intention of God. Humane Vitae, paragraph 10. Beginning with this principle, the encyclical builds its argumentation on the innermost structure of the conjugal act and on the inseparable connection between the two meanings of the conjugal act. Humane Vitae, paragraph 12, which was already presented earlier. The relevant principle of conjugal morality is thus faithfulness to the divine plan manifested in the innermost structure of the conjugal act and in the inseparable connection between the two meanings of the conjugal act.